Here is the thing nobody tells you when they hand you that glossy infographic about building wealth. The rules change. Not a little. Completely. The way money works when you have none is almost the opposite of how it works when you have a lot. And nobody explains that. They just show you the ladder and tell you to climb. So let's actually walk through it. Every rung, every level, what life actually looks like, how the math actually functions, and why most people get stuck somewhere in the middle without ever understanding why. Let's start at zero. Not broke. Zero. Negative, technically. The average American adult under 30 carries somewhere around $20,000 in debt before they have a single dollar saved. Student loans, credit cards, maybe a car payment on a vehicle that's already worth less than what they owe on it. Negative net worth is, for millions of people, the starting line. Not the finish line. The starting line. At this level, money is purely a logistics problem. Every dollar coming in has a destination before it arrives. Rent, food, minimum payments. The math is simple and brutal. There is more month than money. And here is the first uncomfortable truth. At zero net worth, you are not building anything. You are maintaining. You are keeping the machine from breaking down. That is the entire job. This is also the level where the financial system is, quietly, most predatory. Overdraft fees, payday loans charging 400% annual interest, credit cards targeting people with limited options and limited credit histories. The less money you have, the more expensive it is to exist. That is not a motivational talking point. That is how the system is designed. Now move the needle. $10,000 saved. This sounds small, and in the context of lifetime wealth, it is. But functionally, something changes the moment you have a genuine emergency fund. You stop making panicked decisions. The car breaks down and you fix it. You do not put it on a credit card at 22% and spend the next 8 months paying off an alternator. That psychological shift is worth more than the $10,000 itself. This is the level where most financial advice starts making sense. Because before this point, all the standard advice, invest in index funds, max out your 401k, spend less than you earn, was technically correct, but practically useless. You cannot invest money you do not have. You cannot build a buffer while actively drowning. At 10,000, you have graduated from survival to stability. Different game. Now let's talk about the first real threshold. $100,000 net worth. This number carries an almost mythological weight in personal finance circles. 100,000 is where compounding stops being a concept and starts being a fact you can observe with your own eyes. Here is the math. At 7% average annual returns, roughly what a broad index fund has historically delivered over long periods, $100,000 grows to $107,000 in a year without you doing anything. $7,000. For free. Roughly. That is more than many people make in a month of actual work. The problem is, it takes most people an extremely long time to get here. The median American household has a net worth of around $120,000. But that number includes home equity. And for a huge portion of that group, it is almost entirely home equity. Liquid investable assets are a different story. Most households have very little. But let's say you are here. 100,000. What changes? Time starts working for you instead of against you. Before this point, your income is the primary engine of your financial life. After it, there is a second engine running quietly in the background. It does not roar, but it never stops. Now we start getting interesting. $500,000. $500,000 net worth. At this level, you are inside the top 20% of American households by net worth. You probably do not feel wealthy. That is the first strange feature of this zone, the gap between what you have and how you feel about it. You are still working. You still check the price of things. You probably still wince at a restaurant bill. But the math has shifted meaningfully. At $500,000 growing at 7%, You are generating $35,000 a year in paper wealth without touching a dollar of it. That is above the federal poverty line for a family of 4. Your money is, in a technical sense, outpacing poverty entirely on its own. What does life actually look like here? You are probably a dual-income household. You own a home in a reasonably priced market or have significant equity. You have retirement accounts, 401k, maybe a Roth IRA. You are not worried about catastrophe in the same visceral way. But you are not free either. One bad year, job loss, health crisis, divorce, and the number goes backwards fast. You are comfortable, but comfort is not the same as security. People at this level discover that distinction eventually, usually the hard way. $1 million. The number everyone talks about, the milestone, the dream, the finish line that, when you actually reach it, turns out not to be a finish line at all. The Millionaire Club is bigger than most people think. About 13% of American households have a net worth exceeding $1 million. That sounds impressive until you realize what $1 million actually buys you in 2025. In San Francisco or New York, it buys you a modest home and not much else. In the Midwest, it is considerably more meaningful, but still, financially speaking, it is not what television told you it was going to be. Here is the math that reframes everything. $1 million, invested conservatively at a 4% withdrawal rate, the classic retirement planning benchmark, generates $40,000 a year. Before taxes. That is a comfortable lower middle-class income in most American cities. You are not flying private. You are not retired in any luxurious sense. You have achieved a kind of modest, sustainable financial independence, which is genuinely wonderful, and also genuinely humbling given what the cultural mythology around the word millionaire has always promised. What does actually change at 1 million? The nature of risk changes. You start making decisions not to maximize gain but to protect what you have. Loss aversion, psychologists call it, becomes a dominant force. A millionaire who loses 30% in a market crash does not just lose $300,000, they lose the feeling of safety they spent 20 years building. That psychological weight changes how people invest, how they vote, how they see the world. Money, at this level, starts shaping identity in ways that were not true before. Now we are in different territory. $5 million. This is where, for most people, genuine financial freedom begins. Not the fantasy version, the actual version. $5 million at a 4% withdrawal rate is $200,000 a year before taxes. In most of the country, that is genuinely enough to live without working, maintain a comfortable lifestyle, educate children, travel, and still sleep without anxiety. This is the number that serious financial planners tend to use when clients say they want to retire early and actually mean it. At $5 million, something else changes. Access. This is the threshold where you start interacting with a different version of the financial system. Private banking relationships. Investment products that simply do not exist for people below a certain asset level. Lower fees, paradoxically. The more money you have, the less percentage-wise you pay to manage it. The financial industry runs on a pricing model that charges you more to be poor and less to be wealthy. It does so openly. It calls this asset-based pricing, and nobody blinks. At $5 million, your primary financial challenge is no longer accumulation. It is preservation and allocation. Where does it sit? How much in equities? How much in bonds? How much in real estate? How much in alternatives? These decisions, handled correctly, determine whether $5 million becomes $10 million or slowly erodes. They are not intuitive decisions, and the people selling you advice about them have interests that do not always perfectly align with yours. $10 million. This is where things get genuinely strange. $10 million is the entry point to the ultra-high net worth category as defined by most wealth management firms. It is also the level at which the relationship between money and time becomes almost philosophical. At $10 million, even putting everything in treasury bonds, risk-free, government-backed, you are generating somewhere around $400,000 to $500,000 a year, without touching principal. That is more than 98% of American households earn from working, and it requires nothing from you. No labor, no decisions, no alarm clocks. The interesting question is, what do you do with yourself when the economic pressure is completely gone? And the uncomfortable answer, one backed by a fair amount of research on lottery winners, trust fund heirs, and people who sold companies, is that a lot of people do not know. Purpose, it turns out, is not something money provides. It just removes the economic necessity of finding it urgently. People at 10 million tend to fall into a few distinct behavioral categories. Some work harder than ever, not because they need to, but because work is identity. Some become philanthropists with varying degrees of genuine altruism and strategic image management. Some simply try to maintain their lifestyle and discover that lifestyle inflation is remarkably efficient at absorbing even large sums. And some, honestly, drift. $100 million. At this level, the word wealth has been replaced by something else. Capital. Power. The ability to shape systems rather than simply navigate them. $100 million is not just more money than 10 million. It is a qualitatively different kind of resource. At this level, you are not investing in the market. You are investing in the people who run the market. You are funding political campaigns. Not because you believe you are buying outcomes, you never say that, but because access and goodwill are worth more than any stock. You have a family office. This is a private company whose entire purpose is to manage your wealth, your taxes, your legal exposure, your estate planning, and occasionally your children's behavioral problems. A decent family office costs a few $1,000,000 a year to run. At 100 million, that is 2% of your assets. You consider this reasonable. Your effective tax rate is probably lower than your accountant's effective tax rate. This is legal. The tax code at this level is not the same document that most people interact with. It has entirely different provisions, depreciation schedules, carried interest rules, charitable vehicles, trust structures, that were built over decades largely by people who benefited from them lobbying the people who wrote them. The math is not complicated. The access required to run the math is. At 100 million, your primary concern is not making money. It is keeping money, moving money, and influencing the environment in which money operates. You are not a player in the economy. You are, in small but real ways, an architect of it. Because there is a thing we have not said explicitly. The journey from 0 to 100 million is not a straight line with equal difficulty at every rung. It is sharply front-loaded. The distance from 0 to 100,000 is, for most people, the hardest stretch, measured in years, in discipline, in sacrifices of immediate pleasure for distant reward. The distance from 50 million to 100 million is largely a matter of time and not losing too much of it along the way. This is the fundamental asymmetry that nobody really teaches. The system rewards people who already have. It taxes, in time, in fees, in interest rates, in opportunity cost, people who do not. This is not a conspiracy. It is a series of individually rational decisions made by financial institutions, legislators, and inherited power structures that collectively produce a very predictable outcome. Knowing this does not solve it, but not knowing it guarantees you will be confused about why the rules seem to keep changing as you move through the levels. They do change. And the higher you go, the more the rules exist to serve the people who have already arrived. So here's the question worth sitting with. If the game is designed the way it is designed, if the compounding advantages are real, if the access gaps are structural, if the tax efficiencies are reserved for people who already have significant capital, then what, exactly, is the advice for someone standing at 0 or 10,000 or even 500,000? The honest answer is, the advice is still to play. The returns on not playing are worse. Compound growth, index investing, spending less than you earn, building skills that pay. These things work. They are just slower, harder, and less forgiving for people who start with less. Which is most people. But the bigger question is not a personal finance question. It is a design question. About who built the system. About what it was optimized for. About whether the rules that govern money at the top should look anything like they currently do. That question does not have a clean answer. And anyone who tells you it does, whether they are selling a book, running for office, or managing your portfolio, is probably selling something else too.